Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Rasheed.
Hi, welcome.
We want to welcome you all to this third part of the series. And I think we're just going to start off by doing a quick recap of what we've discussed so far.
Yeah, thanks, Vlad. It's been an interesting journey so far, isn't it? So this series is really on finding oneself, and many people will be on that journey of finding themselves. It's quite funny, isn't it, that we spend this whole lifetime with ourselves, but then we still sometimes feel as though we need to find ourselves, or that we'll feel lost. That's interesting to note in itself, isn't it? So in our very first of these sessions, we looked at the nature of life. And people might be asking themselves all sorts of questions. Why am I here? You know, and in that first session, we looked at the fact that it would appear that we find ourselves here in our own unique body, in this vessel. And that life has its ups and downs. All the different seasons of life will come and will go. And we'll have all sorts of different ideas, ideals, and ideologies about life that have been given to us, that we found, that we've discovered, that we assimilate, that we embrace, or that we reject. But nonetheless, all the seasons of life happen. You know what I mean? And that life will have its excitements, its disappointments, its thrills and its spills, its ups and downs. That seems to be the nature of life. And there seems to be certain imbalances, inconsistencies, different circumstances, and all sorts of issues that we find ourselves wrestling with during this journey of life. So that's what we really looked at in the first session. And the last thing to say about that, you know, people often find that very difficult, especially after spending some time, and we might feel that there are all sorts of things that we're wanting to, that we'll either like or not like about ourselves, about others, or about the world. And it causes all sorts of challenges and all sorts of conflict. And it sometimes means that people spend their whole life actually in conflict with themselves or with others. So really, this whole series is for people who wanting to go on a journey of inner peace, and hopefully more peace in the world around them, in their relationships, in the world more broadly. The second episode, we were really looking at the nature of mind. You know, what is this thing called mind? And I guess what we're talking about is a number of things here: thought, ideas, ideologies, concepts. You know, so first, if we were to gently kind of recap, first of all, what happens is we have all these different kind of sensations that are going on, and especially when we're very young, we don't really know much about them, and then we get more used to being taught language, ideas, ideals, concepts. We develop beliefs and so on, and the beliefs kind of shape our worldview and our perception and all of the rest of it. And then we tend to be pretty much stuck into this matrix of seeing life very much through the mind, very much through the mind. But this isn't the whole story. And again, very often this causes all sorts of conflict, because even, you know, again, you know, very briefly, you know, because we're taught language and we're taught ideas and ideals and all of these kind of things, that this thing very quickly can create divisions, divides, misunderstanding. So I may have touched on this, that language is our greatest contribution to understanding and misunderstanding. And even if you think about with these thoughts and mind and so on, you know, if I was to say to you, for example, any viewer, Vlad, to think about the color blue, one person might show us this shade of blue, somebody else might be thinking of this shade of blue, and all of a sudden there's a difference that we're thinking about two different things. And then, you know what I mean? If I then say, even as simple as these things, these colors, red and blue, in so many different countries and so many political systems, and between different rival groups, these things are football teams, hugely different things, and battles ensue from colors. Of course, it's important for us to, or if I say the word money, one person thinks the word money is the most amazing thing, one person thinks the root of all evil. So all of these things create this this mind field that can sometimes actually lead to a minefield in the battlegrounds. So this stuff of mind is what tends to separate people. It's what can subtract, and so this is why somebody finds themselves going on this other journey where they might feel either that the battle that's going on within themselves has become so challenging or perplexing, or that around them. So that's the journey that we've covered so far. So sometimes what happens, Vlad, and that leads us to this third chapter, which is really about the heart, you know, the nature of the heart. So sometimes we find ourselves, Vlad, whereby we feel this knocking. Something isn't feeling right. You know, sometimes it's, you know, this particular situation, a particular relationship, a particular event that's happened, and it just doesn't feel right. Sometimes it's a major event. There's been a loss, there's been a bereavement, and so on. And we realize, I find ourselves asking, what is this nature of life like? Maybe I've just been caught up in all these ideas, or something serious, like when we're recording this during this COVID-19 thing, during the time that we're recording, lots of people from an external event have been asking themselves, hang on a minute, what's really important in life? What's important to our relationships? What's important in our world? Are we really caring about ourselves? Are we really caring about our planet? Is there another way in which we can engage with things? This is the call of the heart. So that's where we start, the call of the heart. The call of the heart.
Is this, so I'm just, you know, I picked up on you mentioning division, this division that arises from differences of perception, from misunderstanding, perhaps, from just natural differences between personalities. I'm just wondering, because if I understood correctly, you mentioned these divisions in relation to the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Is the mind only causing these, or can the mind also perhaps properly used or looked at from a different point of view, can it also provide you know, a unification, a healing of those divisions?
Beautiful question. That's a beautiful question for us to sit with. And it would seem that the journey of the heart is the journey in which that would be more likely to become possible. Because if I'm just in mind, I just tend to be caught up in all of these notions of, this is who I am, this is who the other person is, this is what I need to do, with this, there's always something to be fixed, resolved, problem solved, and so on. So it's a little bit like an engine that's running all the time and begins to burn out. What you say, it would seem, is possible when we go on a journey on the heart. And I say that because many people will have been there, isn't it? You know, those times where just, even if we're very logical, lots of things seem to be fine, and we're working on something and we get really caught up in it. After a while, we get very tired, we get very taxed, we become very overwhelmed by something. We tend to just go around in circles. So let's see if that becomes possible on a journey of the heart, because otherwise the difficulty is purely with mind. There's always something else to do, to fix, or one minute everything seems fine, and then the next minute it's worried. One minute my bank's done, seems fine. Then the next minute I've run out of money, or then one minute people seem to love me. The next minute I've not heard from somebody and I feel worthless. Right? Mm-hmm. It's the nature of the mind. Always in questioning. It will be noisy. So it will continue to be functional in terms of very day-to-day task. I need to fix this cup. I need to do this. I need to set the alarm clock. That's all fine. But these deeper questions of my relationship to myself, my relationship to others, or the challenges when people do see things differently, are not resolvable purely by mind alone. Mm-hmm. And I'd invite anybody who's just watching this just to run that by them. Run it by the mind, but also my invitation here is to run it by the heart, which is what we're going to look into. Such a beautiful question. See, what's interesting now, Vlad, as we then begin to move into this, the nature of the heart has a completely different energy. You might notice as I'm even beginning to talk about this now. I've slowed down. There's a quietening. In mind, there's a lot of noise. The heart has a different rhythm. It has a different tempo. In a way, it doesn't have a language. In a way, it doesn't have concepts. It's unconcerned. See, the mind is the field of problems, problematizing. The heart is a unifier. This word heart, even, use other different words, whatever word resonates with you, with this heart. Might be another word. I find the word heart quite useful. It seems to resonate. But for you, the listener, it might be another word that comes to. So if we think about it, we often. So how do we discover the heart, especially if we're in a place of very, very noisy mind? There's a number of ways in which people tend to find it. Sometimes, you know, when we get, if we're new to this, if we're in a place where we're just in overwhelm, what tends to happen is that we become exhausted, we become very tired, we might even either fall asleep or that we realize that I need to go and take a break, or I need to find myself going to walk, even if I'm somebody who hates nature. Oh, I need to get out here, I need to go for a walk, I need to clear my mind, there's been an argument or something, and all of a sudden somebody goes out for a walk. And here's a very good example of it. Before, I've been really concerned by this big problem at work or at home or with a relationship or this or with that, and I go for a walk in the park or somewhere by the sea, wherever it is, down the street. First of all, I've been carrying all these things with me. After about 10 minutes, especially in somewhere like nature, nature has a very good way of doing this. We're disinterested in so many of the things before. We're far more interested in just the relaxation, feeling more at peace and feeling more at ease. That deadline seems, it happens on a Friday evening, isn't it? Or Friday during the day, you know, people working 9 to 5, 1 minute project, and then it gets to a certain point, sometimes it's as early as 11 o'clock in the morning, where suddenly there's no interest, we're far more interested in the pizza that we might be eating or doing something fun, you know what I mean? That's a very simple, playful example of it. On the more serious example, we feel exhausted and so we realize we need to rest, we need to connect. So sometimes the way to the heart is, and it varies through exercise, through meditation, through quiet prayer, through all of these things, tends to be the connection back to the heart. So maybe that's the first thing to say. Is that a useful kind of starting point, Vlad?
I really like this idea of the heart not functioning based on concepts, perhaps on categories, because yes, I feel that in my own at least mind, things are always perfectible, let's say, and this only happens because they can be labeled, they can be put into a hierarchy. You know, they can be numbered and measured, whereas a dimension which doesn't work with those concepts sounds very appealing from that point of view.
That's lovely what you say, because interesting, it even appeals to the mind. There's something in it when the mind, run it by the mind, again, anyone who's watching this, the mind, often what happens here, it's hearing something, maybe even not the words that we're saying, there's something in the music of what's being communicated here, right? The mind becomes fascinated, it knows there's something in it. Because of course the mind, the programmed bit is just part of this brain, this whole system. It would seem that, you know, and the scientists and so on, the biologists who know more about this stuff than me will say that there's an interconnection, and you know that the heart pumps the blood around the body, and you know, of course, if the heart dies and the mind dies and so on, there needs to be oxygenation of the mind. So there is an interrelationship between all of these things, where sometimes we're just sort of caught up here, which is why, for example, in meditation, just moving our attention from here, just noticing the thoughts, and letting them float by, and we're settling far more into the body, into the breath, because the breath is happening anyway, despite the mind, right? So there is intelligence before, beyond, between the mind, beyond the thoughts, which we don't really recognize when we're so caught up in thoughts, but it's clearly there. If our conscious thinking mind, day-to-day rattling brain, were to be in control of the breathing, it would be a huge problem. Oh, stop. Oh, I've got to think about this. Oh, I've got to think about that. Fortunately, it has nothing to do, the bit that we're talking has nothing to do with that. Thank goodness, otherwise we wouldn't really be here. So by reconnecting to the breath, the lungs, that heart area, we reconnect. And we realize the fragility of life. We realize the fragility of this body. We realize there's all sorts of things going on that I've no idea about. So the heart is the realm where we don't really know anything about. We don't really know. We don't really know. There's a different type of knowing, feeling, sensing, right? Sometimes there is a feeling of knowingness, but it's not this mind knowingness. It has a different quality to it. It's not a knowingness that tends to be about trying to win, be better than. It tends to be far more of a peacefulness and at oneness, it would seem. Mind then has a habit of creeping back in, which is why this thing about the nature of the heart, and then this, I guess, this path that many people find themselves going on of how can I live more heartfully will emerge, because there'll be moments where it's there, this peace, this calm, and then it can be gone. So that might be the moment where I'm having a wonderful time, or I'm not thinking about anything, or I'm by the beach and I'm just there by the sea and I'm not no care in the world. And then the next minute, the thoughts of what I need to do next creep in, and then suddenly there's anxiety. So this is why the nature of the heart and this path, and let's say the path, this heartful path, becomes something that many people will be attracted to. But it's very difficult to describe. Do you see? It's very difficult to say much. Do you see the magic of it? Do you see the magic of it? It's not something that can very easily be boxed. The mind wants to box this and own this and da da da. So this is that, and this is that. So in a way, as we even get to this part of the discussion, it will require care. Because in a way, concepts, ideas, and all of these things have no place here.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Recently since I'm training to become a coach, we've done the presence module, and the presence module includes working with silence. And it was very interesting to see how powerful silence can be, even in building trust, for example, or which of course requires a certain peace of mind. But it can also communicate quite a lot. It can illuminate, let's say, even one's own confusion. It's not always the mind that brings light and clarity.
Beautiful. Absolutely. This is magical what you bring to the equation here with silence. The calmer you are, the calmer life is. The stiller you are, the calmer life is. Silence is very, very, very powerful, because it both is nothingness and the potential for something to be seen or perceived, perhaps in the silence. So it's both nothing and potentially potential. And there would seem to be something like this even in science, but I'm not pretending to be a scientist here about. But what's interesting here, I remember I used to be a Samaritan volunteer, and for a while I was fortunate enough to be the co-director of the Samaritans in central London, which helps people in their distress, including people who are suicidal. I have a saying that once emerged many years later: sometimes in life there's no problem, sometimes in life there's no solution. And between these two apparent poles, life flows. The beauty about silence is that sometimes take It's interesting moment when people would, for example, will observe silence. Often the most common one will be, it might be either, let's say, prayer. People might be silent. For example, prayer, they're silent with meditation, so that there's a sense that there's something beyond them and perhaps between them. It's interesting when people are meditation, when they're trying to go within, for example, people will be silent, for example, when there's been a bereavement. Interesting, another time, either a personal bereavement or a collective bereavement in terms of war, loss, and so on. So in some of these situations, there's a realization that, take, for example, a bereavement, there's no resolve to that. But through the silence, it would seem to be solace, perhaps a different kind of understanding of the nature of life. The nature of life, again, begins to make itself known to ourselves. And you're right, that also that connectivity is possible in silence, isn't it? Even if I go somewhere where I don't speak the language, we both speak different languages, often there's a different kind of connection. There's almost a heart connection of, you know what I mean? Of them acknowledging the nod, and suddenly it's great because language, the non-language, the fact there's not language is a connector. There has to be something else. There's a heart, there's an intentionality that happens. Silence is very, very profound. And so, for example, when I was a Samaritan volunteer, I realized that there'll be sometimes people, all sorts of challenges, cognitive challenges, life circumstantial challenges that, what could I do? So silence becomes often a very, 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 very potent thing. It's also powerful in this way. Creatives and artists know it. When they're still, when they're silent, ideas come in. So I, for example, as an artist, know one minute there's nothing, next minute there's a song. But often we don't equate from the mind silence, stillness, nothingness with potential. We think, oh, it's a lot, I've got to be occupying myself with something. There's not a realization of the power of the nothingness, because often we're afraid of the nothingness. It reminds us also of our mortality and all sorts of other things, or the unknown, because we can't label it, right? It's a bit like when people think about space or infinite stuff, the mind boggles and it shuts down, it does that, it just kind of cuts out, doesn't it? Or if people think about what happens at death, apart from the ideas and concepts we have, but there's a nothingness, which is why we often try and block out all of these different kind of things. You know what I mean? Or if I was to ask, one of my best friends loves to ask this question, what's your next thought going to be? This is a really good question. For when we think we know everything through the mind, what's my next thought going to be? What's the thought after that? If I am the controller of all of these things, what's the next thought going to be? So the invitation is always here, inviting us back to the heart, to the silence. And these things seem to be part of the qualities of the heart. Silence, presence that you were talking about, and that ability, a different kind of connectivity. A different kind of when, somebody says something and they share their story. Vlad, let's say you've shared your story. The moment's silent. And I'm just hearing you, I'm just listening intently. I'm present. Connectedness. Oneness. See? Sometimes we feel that space. When we're coaching, as you know, when they did that presence module, they'll probably tell you, sometimes when somebody's saying, hold that space, it can be, we're desperate, hold that space. Suddenly they might say, but you know what, Vlad, I was thinking about that, but I'm not so sure that's important now. The breakthrough. The heart sometimes comes in after the mind stopped. Well, maybe I just need to accept that we see things differently. The number of times where two people, let's say even people are close, they care about each other, there's not even the other, they're on paper close. And before there was an argument and so on, and we decide I'm going to go in there and give them a piece of my mind, that saying. And then for some reason we think, actually, let me not do that. And then suddenly there's a different kind of connection. Something tells us not to go in there, and suddenly there's a breakthrough. This is the invitation. This is the invitation of the heart. The invitation. the invitation. And I love the saying, is the room in your heart? I love the saying, is the room in your heart? So the question here is the room in your heart? As we become more open-minded, what we're doing in this talks are, in a way, we're becoming more open-minded, we're broadening our perception, we're opening up the mind, we're looking at the nature of life. We're looking at it, so we're seeing what's there. Because a lot of the time, it even just happened to me this week, and slowing down can be a really good example of this. I was doing my morning run, and I was heading toward home. And I thought, the word slow came into my mind, slow down. And suddenly I saw more things I'd never seen on my own street, and it's not a long street, including the symbol of slow. You know, when you slow, how beautiful. So in other words, as we begin to slow down, as we begin to become open-minded, still as the heart opens, as the mind opens, the perception is greater, so you're absolutely right. It's possible that our thinking, the clarity, why do people say sleep on something? Sleep on a decision if you're unsure about, sleep on it. Because it's the rest, it's the something else, the other stuff that can get to, we're able to, you know, because when we're talking about the mind, we're only talking about usually, and our thoughts and all this, a certain collective of knowledge that we have immediately available to us, which is what we tend to be currently focusing on. There's the rest of the library and knowledge and all the other experiences. Another quick example about it, when I'm coaching people, sometimes what will happen is I'll start speaking to somebody, then after a while, through just being present, all this other knowledge of what they said in the past comes back to mind. But it happens through the stillness, through the silence. So Vlad, it's really good that you're talking about bringing in this thing about the silence and the presence. Present is also profound. Standing by a stranger, just being there, sitting with us when we're unwell. It happens in the hospital. The presence, just the love. This is very profound. I've said this is a very important point. I do a lot of work here with the National Health Service here in the UK. Once I was in a room full of coming for doctors and nurses, a combination. I said to them, what is it that does the healing? Before you cut me open, before you pour something into me, before any of this stuff, I have to, somehow there needs to be some kind of trust. Let's use this word, and this is somewhere between the mind and the heart. So there's something for that I have to, and so, but there's something then in the other person, there's something about that half, you know, we've all experienced, isn't it? There's something in their kindness, there's something in their presence, we can't put our finger on it. There's something there of their intentionality, there's something, and the heart knows it. But what more can we say that? It's very difficult to say much more of that, but to put it to the test. Show up with your heart. Those times when we just sit beside, it happens all the time. When people are dying on their deathbed, people would just sit with somebody. And let's say the people there've been lots of, you know, battles during life, and we'll just sit with them. Something in the lovingness and the heart, the connectivity. So many people have had experiences of this. It's profound, but we don't tend to put, when we think of the heart, we think of romance, this, and we think, oh yeah, it's kind of nice and one way to kind of do, or it's morally right, but we don't think it has profound power. We don't think it has profound power. But look at the Dalai Lamas, look at the Mandelas, look at the Martin Luther Kings, there's so many of these, and look at the people who have next to nothing, but there's always food in the pot. You know, so forget even the famous, the mighty and the good. These people, they're nothing, but they have a heart. And the heart is fuller than any mind, deeper than any gold mine. These people who have discovered or reconnected to the heart. It's beautiful. It's very, very, very beautiful. Or when it happens in music, we see a piece of music, or we see that you take, Vlad, the most hard-hearted person, you take them to see a certain movie, you know, and they're trying to notch, and the tear, or by themselves, weeping like a baby. What's that? Something that connects to their sense of humanity. Weeping like a baby, or a song, sung from the heart to the heart, bypasses it. Here's the thing, the heart can bypass the mind heart bypass. Can bypass the mind and connect immediately with the heart of a stranger. It's possible. Can the mind do that?
It's difficult, with difficulty. So what are the ingredients for enabling a heart bypass?
Yeah, and the heart bypass is really the mind bypass, isn't it? But you know, this living by the heart, this living from the heart, heartfulness. Goes back to some of the things we talked about before. Maybe, you know, you said the ingredients. If you think about ingredients, when we want ingredients is usually when we're hungry. So if there's a hunger, if there's a thirst, if there's a desperation, then that's a very good invitation. We're hungry. We're hungry. We're desperate. Our life the pain's too much. The pain being inflicted on us, the pain we're inflicting on ourselves. We're tired. Happens often. When the mind seems to have no more answers. And it could be just that thirst of really wanting to find oneself. These tend to be the predeterminates. Then the nature of the heart and the openness. We become kind of open. We become open to this journey. We become open to look again. Because when I'm in the mind, I'm usually just trying to refine, define, fine-tune, improve. And I'm really not open to, I'm not really open to other people's ideas. I want to hear them, but I don't want to necessarily adopt them, really. How many people in a debate, debate, the object is to win the debate. One's on one side, another's on another side. This person's a Republican, this person's a Democrat, this person's this and this and this, you know. Who from supporting one team is going to go and sit on the bench of the other? Doesn't happen. So there has to be a really willingness, a readiness to become open-hearted. First of all, I would say to oneself, to be compassionate to oneself is the best way. To be kind to oneself, because to recognize that there's a how-to. Then the journey has begun. It's a journey of embracing oneself, embracing life itself. So, I mean, what we're doing is beginning to, aren't we? We're beginning to then describe some of the, I guess some of the benefits, some of the natures, some of those ingredients. But the heart is about really the biggest ingredient really is compassion. I mean, it's love and it's compassion, which is an aspect of love. But I would say, you know, compassion. It's about compassion. The compassion to oneself is a thing that can heal oneself. The compassion toward others is a thing that can create a bridge. Compassion. The moment I become compassionate, the whole thing changes. I'm sensitive to this person. I realize this person's got their pain and their own challenges. I soften. The mind softens. I park my ideas and they might even dissolve. Oh no, don't worry, let me help you. Oh, that's absolutely fine, I understand. I realize that I also was a bit angry too, I'm so sorry. It's profound. I have a saying that, it's quite a new one, everything boils down to love and compassion or its absence. Everything. Compassion is even more powerful than courage. Sure, with courage you can conquer a world, but only with compassion can you heal or build it. There's not really much ingredients to the heart apart from love and compassion. But it's potent. and it sharpens, it would seem to sharpen all the other senses. The mind then becomes clearer, sharp. This is the thing I didn't expect from going. The mind, at last, the mind then is sharp. Sharp. You know what I mean? It's on it. The mind is absolutely, and you see all these dysfunctional minds in one's own.
It's interesting because we spoke about when we were talking about silence. I don't remember if it was a quote. I think it was a quote. Unfortunately, I don't remember who said it. Mm-hmm. But it was somebody who studied this. I think even on a scientific, in a like scientifically rigorous way. And the conclusion was, to put it succinctly, truly listening to somebody makes that person smarter. It immediately enhances their faculties, their mental faculties, if you are truly listening. So if you're not just hearing in order to provide your answer or to win the argument or to bring them over to your side, but if you're really listening, which involves quite a bit of silence and presence, mm-hmm. Then something almost magical happens, which is they become perhaps their best version of selves. They literally become smarter. And I have actually witnessed this as we were practicing the silence part and the presence part of coaching.
And there's something magical that happens in that, isn't there? Because in that, what happens, Vlad, is that all of a sudden there's a communion. Both parties are present. There's a togetherness. We're not my ideas and your ideas. There's a togetherness. So there's something energetic that happens in that is enriching to both. But just being present, my mind becomes quieter as I'm the listener. I part all my woes and I'm present, and the person who's there, they're heard. Maybe in that there's something that is very nourishing, enriching in some way, and helps them to see and to look, and so on. I remember a number of years ago now, might even be as many as 8 years or more, there was a study that came out, and it said that they discovered that the heart had neurons which we relate to the mind, to the brain. They said that the heart had more than anyone else, the heart has intelligence. I don't know anything about it. That's what the study had said. And those people who are just heartful, who know nothing, read no books, could tell you that. Could tell you that you are able to build richer relationships, fewer wars, fewer battles by meeting them heartfully, having an open heart. So it would seem that this is the nature of the heart. It would seem that it's a softer nature, it's a quieter nature, it's a more compassionate nature, it's a more open nature. It is willing to see oneself and one's own, what we would call, the mind would label shortcomings and so on, realize that things aren't just this or that or black and white, that things are shifting, things are far more uncertain than that. And this is really an invitation. And so in our next conversation, our last conversation, where we're really, really beginning to travel down this path of is finding and following one's own unique path. How do I follow my own? How do I then, from this first stepping stone, landing space, go on this journey, on my own journey, to find myself, to what should I do with this? How will I live with this in my own life? Perhaps how might I practice it? What am I to do in my life? Because it then does bring up those questions. How can my connections, my relationships be better? Do I have this connection with my work and what have you? How do I meet with others with that? But really, as we begin to close, my closing invitation is to invite people just to sit with this silence, with this nothingness, with this heartfulness, and to, I'd say, to just really be kind to oneself, to really wish everyone well. You know, just to start off by wishing absolutely everyone well, including people you don't necessarily want in your life, including all the people who've passed by. This is a beautiful thing that we can all do, to wish oneself well, starting off with all the people you know, wishing everybody else who takes care of you, all the people who, you know, do this and that, you know, everybody, wishing everybody well. Suddenly there's less of a divide between me and the others, and this is the beginning of this heartfulness and being very, very grateful. And gratitude is part of it. You know, gratitude is a huge bit of it. Being grateful for having this body, for being alive, for whatever it is, whatever little or much I happen to have, and gratitude for others in our life, and gratitude for this whole ecosystem that I'm part of. This is the thing that will connect me, that will open up the heart and the mind further, and that is very, very, very nourishing itself. It's nourishing. Gratitude is the most fulfilling food. Gratitude. Start every day with a large bowl of gratitude. So that's what I invite our listeners to do between now and next time, and to return here from that space of heart. And then let's see where we go in terms of finding one's own path from there, and how one's life might look if we were to live from heart.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Rasheed.
Thank you so much.
I think we can, maybe we can end by having a short shared moment of silence to reflect on what we've just said.
Magical. As we're here in the silence, and for those who've been watching, maybe just to bring this to life, I want to invite you, you might even want to place the hand on the heart, if you find yourself on this heartful journey. And I just invite you to just breathe, to breathe in. Inspire means breath, so just breathing in, feeling the heart. Just really being with oneself. Taking that deep breath in and breathing out. And then so you can breathe in the inspiration, hold and notice all the things that you've been holding on to, pain, anger, guilt, whatever, fear, disappointment. Breathe it all out. And just be very, very present with the heart. Let the mind be quiet, let it just flow. If it's a bit noisy, that's fine too. Just letting everything just flow. Just being here present with oneself. Just being grateful for this body, for the mind, for this life. And then returning to the silence. Knowing that this is a place that one can return to at any time, if one's wanting that way to actually begin to connect with the heart. And I'd say, if you're wanting to continue once Vlad and I finish, maybe just pause the video and just stay in this space of stillness, of silence, of connecting to the heart. Yeah, I want to thank you for that. And it's wonderful, Vlad. I can tell you're still deep enjoying the magic of the silence. Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank our viewers and listeners for stopping by and sharing their time.
Thank you, Rasheed. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.